Yeah, there has to be that I think that direction from the top, the expectation from the top, that the expectation look is that Scott, you're responsible for it, but that doesn't mean you get to do it.
Welcome to Getting It Done. Today you'll meet Scott Drake. He has mastered the skills and importance of effective delegation. Welcome, Scott. Thank you very much for joining me on my podcast. And I'd like to give you a few moments to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Ivan, thanks so much for having me. My name is Scott Drake. I am a management consultant and a business coach. And I come out of a tech background. Started my life as a computer programmer, spent some time at Microsoft, spent some time down in Silicon Valley, and ran a couple of companies, started a couple of companies. And like a lot of people who kind of rise through the ranks of management and leadership, I started out not being very good at it. And I joked it took me about 10 years to become a good manager, to become a good leader. And when I became an executive and was hiring other managers and promoting other people, and I saw them having the same struggles, I kind of set out to say, I can't watch them wreck my team for 10 years while they learn how to manage. So I had to find kind of shortcuts for management. So about 2 years ago, I said, okay, I think I've done what I can here in tech. I jumped out and started a training and consulting company where I work with mostly business owners and management teams, helping them kind of shortcut the learning curve around management and just learn how to manage better and learn how to manage well as a team of managers. So I'm kind of a weird tech guy turned organizational development and training, right? It's a kind of a weird flip, but that's kind of the path of my career. And that's a little bit about my background.
Okay, brilliant. I think that will appeal to a lot of people because a lot of entrepreneurs follow that same route. You sort of start off making something, producing something, and then you hire your first hire. Then you've got to figure out how to sort of manage that person. And some time passes. Next thing you know, you've got a team of a couple of people. Next thing you have to delegate something to somebody in that team to start managing it. So it's sort of you learn as you go on the journey, but that's not optimal because. What do we know? We know how to make something well. We're passionate about making that thing well. And next thing, we're spending days and hours and time, dealing with people which are a lot messier than things. A lot more tricky. And I think there's a lot to learn for small business owners on how to manage better and what they could be doing differently. And then the subject of today's talk is about the art of delegating. And I think for myself and my own experience, it took years to figure that out. It took years to figure out how important it is to delegate. And then probably more importantly, it's what to delegate. What is something that you want to let go of effectively and how to understand that. So I think you've got something that a lot of us could learn from and would benefit from. So maybe I'll just hand over to you to sort of get it started.
Yeah, so my very first management role, I had left Microsoft and was back home in Kentucky. And I got a call from my boss from Microsoft. He said, hey, come out to California. I'm doing this startup. I want you to lead the engineering team, right? So I roll in and, he handed me a team of initially, 5 or 6, but we grew it up to maybe about 8 engineers on the team. And I did some things right. I was a good planner and I was good with kind of laying out what we were going to do. But it came to a point where we were delegating, and then specifically around like coaching problem solving. Like I had 2 ways to delegate. I could give them something and then get frustrated when they wouldn't work to my standards, and I would take it back from them. Right? It was they weren't doing
very
it right
common
because I didn't understand that. And then my other approach to delegation was chucking things over the wall and just hoping for the best. And those are 2 of my strategies, right? Those are my 2 delegation strategies at this point in time. But what happened is I ended up taking work away from about half the team, right? So I wasted, we raised, low 7 figures for that startup, and I probably wasted $500,000-$600,000 of that raise in salaries that I did not know how to leverage. I did not know how to work through those people, right? So you look at this startup, this early stage company, and you want to entrust, hey, I need a good engineer to lead my engineers, and that ended up costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, in wasted salaries. So, so kind of what I've learned over the years is I had 2 strategies that were wrong, and there's actually 12 strategies, right? There's 12 strategies for delegating. And we delegate 3 different types of things, right? And each of those 3 things have 4 different strategies based on the level of trust you have in the person that you're delegating to, right? Because that's the other side of it, is that we have to say we have, high trust, low trust, total trust. What is our trust level with this person? And then we're delegating a task or a problem or a responsibility. And based on those, then we actually, and then I can walk through, I'm going to let you ask a couple of questions, but we can walk through all 12 of those. But that's really what I have found, and now what I teach, right? So, part of what I teach and what I do with my coaching work is basically to say, this is all delegation really is. And if you can master it 7 steps in these 12 strategies, you can get really good at it really quick. It doesn't take 10 years, and you're not going to waste hundreds of thousands of dollars of salaries. You can actually learn this pretty quick, and this is how you're going to do it. So that's a little bit of an intro on what this tool is and how it came to be.
On delegating. I had an interesting conversation with my wife at some point, and I said to her, what do you think I do? So I have a business as well on the side, and we have about 45 people in the business, and she said, "Oh no, what you do is very easy. You just have meetings and organize things. I don't actually do anything. I just organize things." Mm-hmm. And I smiled, and I thought, like, wow, if I look at the journey to get to this point where I can have where I can have meetings and organize things, I had to learn a lot about delegating, a lot about the trust, a lot about, you talk about the 3 factors, sort of high, total trust, medium and high, I think you mentioned. And so those things, a lot of pain and suffering went into learning those things. So you talk about your wasted money, exactly. And then as the entrepreneur or the lead, we take on everything. So just because you didn't delegate it didn't mean it didn't get done. If it had to get done, it meant you had to do it. And while you had other people sitting potentially idly or not as effective. So it's super key. So maybe if you can unpack the process. I mean, okay, so we got the 3 levels of trust, and then you mentioned different types of delegation. Maybe you can unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'll just run through the 7 steps real quick. So 7 steps, which is step number 1 is to basically answer 3 questions, which is going to help you understand what you're delegating, what's your trust level. So it's really going to be, what am I delegating? And am I delegating a task or a problem or a responsibility? And here, I'll just read it from this thing. Right, a task is a specific action or steps within a larger initiative. Right, so basically, like, think about something where you have a trainable system. Right, I have a system in place already. I just need somebody to carry out this task as part of the system. They don't have to do a whole lot of thinking. There's not a problem to solve. They just need to, hey, make sure payroll gets run, and this is our process, and this is how we do it. Right, there's no sense in changing the process. It already works. Right, that's a task. A problem is a specific challenge to resolve. Right, let's say, our previous sales approach isn't working. We need to rewrite our sales scripts to get them to work better. This is a problem, right? I don't know exactly what the solution is going to look like. There's not a specific process that we're going to follow, but this is a problem that needs to be solved, right? This is one of the biggest ones that trips up managers, that they try to take those problems and turn them into tasks. They try to do all the thinking and the learning and everything before they delegate it, so that they can delegate a simple task instead of delegating the problem itself, right? They don't know how to coach problem solving. So that problem is the second piece. And then the third is responsibility. Like, you're responsible for the successful management and decision making and outcomes around this particular area. Like, you own our sales process, right? I'm going to hold you accountable every month to hit these sales numbers. I'm not going to be as opinionated on how you do it. You are responsible for it, right? So you have a task, you have problems, you have responsibilities. And a lot of times, most new managers and even owners try to turn everything into a task, right? Yeah. So step number 1 is just really to say, is it a task? Is it a problem or responsibility? So I'll pause there and let you ask a question.
So I think the difference between the task and a problem, quite straightforward. I think I understand the desire to reduce everything to a task, because you're trying to limit. Maybe you're trying to limit the scope of where they can have an impact, which is probably a mistake. Mm-hmm. Then the variance between a problem and a responsibility, maybe. So that one's not is not completely clear.
Yeah. So think of a responsibility like, in my last role, I was a VP of technology. And the CEO made me responsible for everything related to our software development, to our technical infrastructure, to making sure all of our systems are up in place. Right. He gave me basically management control of full responsibility. Right. And I was responsible for the performance-based goals, the outcomes, the KPIs that we negotiated and set. this is what he's managing to. He's not trying to get into the weeds and tell me how to do it. He is saying, Scott, you're the expert. And you've built trust with me, so now I'm gonna make you. We didn't start out that way, right? I had to build the trust up to get to that level, but ultimately he gave me responsibility for that full segment of his business. It can also be smaller. I mean, it can be just a single project. Like, hey, one of my clients is a painting company. They just lost their paint shop. They have to move shops in 90 days, get the whole shop set up. One-time project. The owner went to his GM and said, hey, you are responsible for everything related to us moving into this new facility in 90 days, right? So the owner could step back and say, I trust this person. They're going to. So that's kind of a problem is a little bit smaller, where responsibility is typically a bigger piece. Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, just on a side, how as a staff member, how do I encourage my boss to give me that responsibility, and the associated, how do I earn that trust, I guess, with him? I think a lot of times when I talk to staff, I keep saying to them, whatever, when you're at a barbecue and you're complaining to your mates, about this company that you work for, or your boss who might be, who's not particularly nice, how do you get them to give you that feedback? So in turn, because I hear a lot of people complain, my boss doesn't trust me, but what can they do to help their boss trust them? What can they do? So it's two sides to this coin. One is you want the boss to be able to delegate down to his team, and the other team, you also want the team to be able to sort of say, hey, I'm open for delegation. I want this responsibility. I want this problem. I don't want to just be a minion who's just doing a repetitive task within the business. I'm happy to take on. So I just wondered how, what would you say to somebody in that role is to, how do you build that trust? How do you encourage that delegation?
Yeah, so part of it is going to come back to the manager, right? The managers, number one, have to be open to it.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
A lot of times the managers are holding control because a number of managers I work with hold control because they feel like if I give my team problems, I'm not doing a good job, right? My job isn't to give them problems. My job is to give them something to do, right? And so part of it is that the manager, they have to be thinking the right way. They also have to kind of have detached their ego sometimes from solving the problems, right? Scott, the engineer, his ego was very attached to engineering being done the way Scott wanted it done, right? So part of it is that the manager has to be open. And you can try to coach and suggest some of those things to your manager, but if the manager is not open, it's going to be a little bit harder, which is also what sometimes training the managers helps. You have to kind of get them to open their mind a little bit to what this all is. But yeah, if I'm in that situation, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see what is my boss's pain points. Right? Is he overworked? Is he, are there too many problems? Is he, what is he complaining about? Is he complaining about specific things? Are there areas where he or she may be weak, where this isn't their strength or something like that? Or, if I see them kind of struggling in an area or struggling with a particular type of problem or something, I would also just encourage it and let them know, hey, I'm open to, I appreciate the opportunity of these tasks to carry these things out. I also like to solve problems. This is, and to try to find small things that they can do to start building that trust, is really kind of an important piece. But again, the manager has to have some idea that this is how they're thinking, and that they need to be open to that, and then open to as the trust level rises, to give more control and to let go a little bit more of what it is that they're delegating.
Yeah. So sort of both parties have to play their role in. But it starts with the manager. If the manager is closed, it's a big problem. Big problem for the owner of the business because the manager is not doing his job in taking responsibility versus doing the task. I guess is what you're sort of saying, and that's the problem.
Yeah, and it's funny. In my last role, I ran tech. There was a counterpart who ran content. And this was an education company. And we used to get into these conversations where he was amazed that I wasn't in the weeds with my team. And he was deep in the weeds with his team, to the point, honestly, that there were management things that weren't getting done that needed to get done. Right? He has a job as an executive, as a manager, to do executive things and to do management things. And he was so deep in the weeds with his team that he wasn't doing his job. Right? And so, yeah, there has to be that I think that direction from the top, the expectation from the top, that the expectation look is that Scott, you're responsible for it, but that doesn't mean you get to do it. That doesn't mean you have to do it. Like, you're responsible for working through other people to do it, not doing it yourself, right? So there has to be, I think, some of that from the expectation of how they're successful has to be set, that it's about working through others, not doing everything themselves.
And then you might have the counter or the contra to that, where you get a manager who is just not doing anything.
Yeah.
And, so that's also, I'm just thinking as a business owner, having these different sort of people within the business, where you've got the manager, the ideal manager who's taking full responsibility, he's delegating, he's not in the weeds, but he's very attached to the outcome, and that's his responsibility, and he's fulfilling those roles. Yeah. But in the real world, you get these mixes of people, so you get the variant who wants to be in the weeds, like you say, his ego is attached to it. So it's like, my solution, I solved it. I want the hero, I want to take the glory, which doesn't help the team. And then the other side, where he almost is absentee from the process, where it's sort of like, well, the team didn't deliver, it's not my fault, or so your breakdown is actually absolutely key. The sort of the responsibility, problem, and task is as a business owner, it's key, because if I have a team that's bigger than a couple of people, there's enough space for responsibility versus just problem solving, or versus just doing the task. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So let me walk you through the rest of these. I think it's going to become clear in a minute that there's some clarification that's going to, I think, help with that conversation you're having there. So let me walk through the rest of these steps real quick, and then I think that's going to help. That's going to help illuminate stuff. So step one is answer 3 questions. What am I delegating, which is task, problem, or responsibility? What is my own personal level of know-how? Right? How opinionated am I going to be on this? How strongly do I hold opinions on some of these things? There's some things I delegate I have no opinions on, right?
Yes.
I have an opinion for the outcome, but not necessarily for the how, right? And then what is the risk, right? So the idea I'm trying to answer is basically to say, is it one of those 3? And then what's my level of trust? And based on my level of trust, there's this grid that basically has those 12 strategies that I will say, if I'm delegating a task and my trust is low, then this is how I need to approach it. This is my strategy. If I'm delegating responsibility and my trust is high, then I need to delegate it in this way, right? So the strategy helps you choose those 12 strategies. So once you understand, the what, and then you're going to answer the who, which is step 2. Step 3 is going to be choose a strategy. Step 4 is going to be to delegate, which is to have that conversation where you're going to based on the strategy, you're going to communicate that to the person you're delegating to in a different way. If you're delegating a task, you're going to do it one way. If you're delegating a responsibility, you're doing it a different way, obviously, right? The 5th step is negotiate, which gets into kind of what you're talking about right now, which is to basically say you need to now enter a negotiation with that person you're delegating to. Like, what are the next steps? What are your expectations, right? If your expectations are that they stay more involved, than maybe Scott did in his last role, right? That's the point in time to kind of have those conversations and set that expectation of right. What does this negotiation look like? And then also what you're negotiating is step 6, which are going to be your check-in points, right? When are we going to check in again? When are we going to talk about this? When are you going to, what's this flow of information going to look like? Like a bigger project, you might check in weekly. Something that just needs to get done, you might need to, you might check in a day when it's done, right? It depends on what you're doing, but you need to set that and then have that. And then step 7 is really to give and get feedback, which is to say, we're either still in process and we're still looping through some of this stuff, but we need these feedback loops in place, or when we finished it, hey, we're done. What can we do better? What went well? Some of those kinds of things. So there's really those 7 steps that you go through no matter what you're delegating, but based on the 12 strategies, you're going to go through them a little bit differently.
Right. That makes sense. I'm just having a quick read of the steps as well. I think that this, your point in the step 4 with the make the assignment, provide clear instructions, is probably a massive time when delegation fails. It's just simply you're not being clear. And then the step 6, where you discuss your expectations, is also a massive time when delegation fails, is because you're not in tune with the so what I think is a successful outcome and what you think is a successful outcome are not in line, and then I don't want to ever delegate to you again because I feel like you've let me down. But whereas in fact, as the manager or the boss, I have in fact let the team down because I have not been very clear with my expectations and what the outcomes needed to be.
Yeah.
Or then and maybe not clear in instructions.
So the number one, I'll give you the number one reason that happens. The number one reason that happens is that people treat a problem like a task. And they don't understand when I solve a problem, I don't sit down and solve the problem and it's done and I did it perfectly the first time. I go through learning loops, right? There's 6 steps to solving a problem, which is I have to understand what's the problem. I have to understand what the constraints are, like, is there cost factors, risk factors, what resources do I have to work with to solve this problem, right? Brainstorm options, choose an option, right? Once I start implementing a chosen option, a lot of times I realize, that's not going to work. Right, I figured something else out. Right, there's something I didn't realize about the goal. There's something I didn't realize about a constraint. Now I have to go back and work. So you end up in this learning loop, right? Mm-hmm. So problem solving is not a one-time thing. It is often a learning loop, and it's also a point where you can fail. Right, you might get into this problem. You might spend weeks working on something and realize, it's just not solvable right now. But when you delegate that, like when you do it yourself, all these things are happening, and you're not necessarily aware of them. But when you delegate it, those learning loops become very obvious because the person has to come back to you for clarification. But if you haven't delegated this as a learning task as much as a doing task, then the person is not necessarily approaching it the right way, and you as the manager is not approaching it the right way. So the single biggest reason why we feel like our team can't work to our standards or our team can't do things or it's faster if I do it myself is because we're going through these learning loops faster. We can do it faster ourselves than we can work through other people, but then it's not scalable, right? Being able to drive these learning loops out into other people makes us much more scalable as people, but we're never going to be as fast doing one individual task that way.
So actually, that's actually super important. You started right in the beginning. You mentioned that the biggest problem is treating it as a task instead of a problem, but it's actually probably the biggest reason why a lot of delegations fail is exactly what you just described. Mm-hmm. Because and I'm just going to repeat it just for my own benefit is what you said makes sense. So if I give you a task to do, pay month-end wages or pay wages, it's generally very straightforward, simple. Here's a list of people to pay and this is how you pay it and you know what to do. But if I give you something that's a little bit more complicated, but in my brain, I see it as a task because I do it repetitively and I'm delegating it. So I treat it as a task because I forget that when I'm doing it, I'm doing this learning process very quickly and adjusting and then coming up with the result. When I hand it off, I'm almost guilty of that. I'm almost guilty of handing off a task where I'm actually handing off a problem. And absolutely, you're right. If I'm handing off a problem, I'm also more tolerant of the outcome, because if it's a problem, it's not a clearly tick box, yes, done, no, not done. It's this is what we're trying to do, and there might be multiple outcomes. The fact that when I'm doing it myself, I resolve all of these things in my head, and I choose the optimal outcome, and then I go with that outcome, is because of that learning loop that you're talking about. That I'm cycling through within my own head, and because I've been doing it, because I'm the main person and I'm the product owner and blah blah blah. So I'm almost guilty of sort of not allowing the person I'm delegating to treat it as a problem. I think actually, and I'm repeating myself because this helps me learn, but you've actually solved the problem I've got in my business at the moment. I have a general manager, and he has this problem in delegating, and he keeps sort of coming up with the thing. It's just easier if I do it myself. Mm-hmm. And the what you've just helped me understand is the problem is not the delegation. The problem is, what is he delegating? Is he delegating a task or a problem? And he has always thought of it as a task, mm-hmm. instead of it as being a problem. And just that subtle, it's not subtle once you understand it. It's massive once you understand it. But it's like a subtle, in the art of delegating, it feels subtle, but it's not subtle. But it's so easy to say this is a task and not a problem, because I've been doing it for 5 years. It's not a problem. It's a task, but it's not. It's a problem that I just solve quite quickly because I have the experience and the knowledge that the person I'm delegating to, doesn't have. So I need to give you that space to treat it as a problem. I went on a course and they spoke about aha moments, like when something becomes clear. I have one of those moments.
Well, good.
Yeah, that's actually incredibly useful.
Yeah, let me give you one more minute if we got time.
Yes.
I think it'll also help. Like when you delegate a problem and you don't have a strong relationship or high trust with that person, then what you ask them to do is research it. Hey, can you go research this and come back with just give me information, right? I don't have time to go get the information. Just go research and bring me information. That's when you have low trust. When your trust goes up a level, then you say, hey, can you research this and come back with a recommendation, right? Why is this? And then when they make the recommendation, you can go, what problems does this solve? What success criteria did you have in mind when you made this recommendation, right? Because often the recommendation is sound based on the success criteria in their head, but you have different success criteria. So now what you need to do is renegotiate that. What you need to say is, okay, yeah, I see that's a good idea based on this. Let me change it a little bit, because that's what happens when we learn, right? When we learn, the goal changes, the goalpost moves, right? And that has to be okay when you're delegating problems. And you need to set that expectation at the beginning when you delegate a problem. Like when I delegate a problem to somebody instead of a task, I'm going to say, look, we're going to go through a learning process. The goalposts are going to move as we're going through this, and it's okay, right? So that second level is you ask them to research and recommend. The third level, once you have a higher level of trust, when they've proven that they have good judgment based on you, right, based on how you think, whatever, then you basically say, hey, go do the research and decide and come back and just share your decision criteria. Just share it with me. Let me make sure that there's not, in 9 times out of 10, you're just going to say, yes, that's great, right? And then the fourth level where you totally trust someone, you just say, just go do it, right? Here's the problem, right? I trust you. We work together enough. You understand what I tend to look for in solutions. So just go do it and report back when it's done and just let me know that it's done, right? So those 4 levels, you can go into with different people, with different types of problems, right? But that's really also helps to kind of eliminate or illustrate the process that you go through when you solve a problem versus delegating a task.
Yes. And obviously the goal is that total trust, because once you have total trust, I as the business owner or the entrepreneur, I'm freed up to focus on the business instead of in the business, which is effectively the holy grail of running these businesses, is that the business can run without the owner or founder or entrepreneur. And that is the holy grail.
Yeah. So if you picture this grid, the grid in the upper left-hand corner is task and low trust, which is the hardest. It's the most involvement of the owner, right? And owners who are struggling often live in this upper left-hand corner. And my goal is to shift them into that bottom right-hand corner, which is you're delegating responsibilities to people you trust, right? Now you've freed your time, right? The more things you can move from the upper left-hand corner to the bottom right-hand corner, the more stuff you can shift from left to right, which left being problem, right being responsibility. The more you can shift those things out, then the more time you're going to free, the more of your life you can get back to do other stuff, right? So that's really where this grid is very helpful, is to be able to say, this is your goal, right? Just pay attention to how much time you're spending in that left-hand corner, and let's see how much time we can get you down to this bottom right-hand corner.
So if people are interested, where can we point them to?
Yeah, the best place
how do they find you?
Yeah, the best place is just to go to scottdrake.co. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. I publish a lot of stuff. This grid is on my LinkedIn profile, right? This is a simple 2-page grid. The tools I create, I don't try to hoard. I don't try to keep them. So definitely, go to scottdrake.co. Reach out to me if you want to see this, or look on LinkedIn and you can download this. And, if you're interested in learning more about it, that's where you can find me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Scott. Highly appreciate it. Very, very interesting and useful.
All right, good. Ivan, thanks so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks.